So this is our fourth video on Reconstruction, and this one's called Early Successes. Not everything was bad, though. There were some early successes and important ones. And the Congress, even before the war was over, had set up what was called the Freedmen's Bureau to get ready for Reconstruction. And the Freedmen's Bureau, as the name implies, was set up to facilitate the entry into the mainstream of the former slaves, the freedmen. And in particular, that meant setting up schools and educating them and trying to also make sure that they weren't abused and we didn't just sink back into de facto slavery again. And then also just some early successes with black leaders who made it into Congress and the Senate in those early years after the Civil War. And that's a huge problem for white Southerners because their whole theory is that this would be impossible, right? If black people can be excellent leaders and be excellent men, their whole theory of reality is sort of down the tubes. So this was great news in the early going. So as we said earlier, the Freedmen's Bureau was a success, and one of their big foci was to make sure that the freedmen and their children had opportunity to become educated. And so building schools and staffing schools was one of their top priorities. And the response to this was overwhelmingly positive among the freedmen. It's been desperate for education and viewed it as a huge privilege and way to make their way forward in the world. And they had been denied education for centuries by the white rulers of the southern states. And there was just a massive positive outpouring of thrill at the prospect of getting educated. So often, apparently, the adults would go with their kids to learn how to read and write because they hadn't learned themselves and they really wanted to. So we discussed a second ago how there were some very successful, powerful black leaders in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War and the first wave of elections that black people were allowed to participate in. And we don't have time to talk about the great number of them. One of them in particular was Blanche Bruce, and he's a former slave from Mississippi who was the first black person to serve a full term in the Senate. Bruce was, by all accounts, quite the great guy. It's way ahead of his time in fighting not just for equal rights for blacks, but for Asians and Native Americans as well. He's a very successful businessman, sort of a juggernaut of empathy and compassion, and really working for everybody's good at a time when, again, so many people were trying to milk the system for their own account. And again, it's the existence of people like him is a terrible problem for racists in the South because he's not supposed to be able to exist. And so his very presence in the Senate and his success as a senator and as a man was quite an insult to white Southerners. So you might be thinking, well, things couldn't have been that bad for blacks after the Civil War because, look, I mean, these guys are getting elected as mayors and senators and congressmen, and so it can't be that bad. Obviously, they must have been able to vote. And again, I never understood this when I was a student, so it's important that we realize what's going on here. We've got that general expression in our language, things are going to get worse before they get better. Well, in terms of Reconstruction and race relations in the South, things got better before they got worse. So these elections are happening, and these black men are being elected to office in, the 10 years after the Civil War. That's when they're winning election, when the troops are down there enforcing the right to vote for the freedmen. And that's not going to last. So it's going to take 100 years to get back to the point that blacks had in the United States in the South in 1875, in many ways, at least as far as the ability to be elected to significant office in the South. So takeaways for this video: name 2 early successes of Reconstruction, give 3 key facts about the Freedmen's Bureau, and describe Blanche Bruce and his accomplishments.